You probably use dozens of Chinese inventions every single day without even knowing it. And I'm not talking about the obvious stuff like gunpowder or paper. From the moment you wake up and check your phone to when you pay for your morning coffee, you're relying on technologies that were first developed during China's Song Dynasty nearly 1,000 years ago. This isn't just another list of ancient inventions either, because here's the thing. The Song Dynasty didn't just come up with clever ideas. They actually figured out how to turn those ideas into systems that could work at massive scale, and those systems literally run our modern world. The Song Dynasty ruled China from 960 to 1279, and during this time, something remarkable happened that historians are only now fully appreciating. While Europe was deep in what we call the Middle Ages, the Song were basically running the world's first successful tech startup, except instead of apps and software, they were revolutionizing everything from money to manufacturing. Today, we're counting down 15 Song Dynasty inventions that you absolutely depend on. And trust me, some of these are going to blow your mind because they're hiding in plain sight. Starting at number 15, we have something that might sound like the most boring thing ever, but actually powers every secure website you visit. Mathematical algorithms developed by a guy named Qin Zhushao in 1247. Now stay with me here, because this gets wild. When you see that little padlock icon in your browser showing a secure connection, your computer is using something called the Chinese remainder theorem to make that encryption work fast enough to be practical. And Qin Zhushao figured out the complete version of this nearly 800 years ago. He didn't just solve a few math problems either. He developed general methods for handling simultaneous congruences and efficient ways to evaluate complex polynomials, which sounds complicated, because it is. But basically, he created the mathematical tools that make modern secure communications possible. Every time your computer processes encrypted data or handles modular arithmetic for cryptography, it's using techniques that Song mathematicians developed when most of the world thought algebra was witchcraft. Number 14 brings us to something that sounds simple, but changed everything about how we build and maintain ships: the dry dock, first clearly described by Shen Kuo in his Dream Pool essays from the 1080s. He recorded how engineers during the Xining reign, which ran from 1068 to 1077, invented this brilliant system where you float a ship into a watertight chamber, close the gates, pump out the water, and boom! Suddenly you can work on the hull without having to flip the entire ship on its side or send divers underwater. Every modern shipyard in the world, whether they're building cruise ships or maintaining nuclear submarines, uses this exact same principle that the Song figured out almost 1,000 years ago. Before this innovation, repairing ships was insanely dangerous and basically involved either careening the vessel on its side, which could destroy it, or trying to work underwater, which usually didn't end well. Coming in at number 13 is the chain pump. And while the basic version existed earlier, the Song Dynasty took it and scaled it up for massive irrigation and industrial projects in ways nobody had imagined before. They called it the Dragon Backbone Pump, which is a way cooler name than chain pump if you ask me, and it could lift water continuously by dragging these wooden pallets through a casing. The genius part was that it was simple enough for one or two people to operate by hand, but you could also hook it up to animal power or water wheels when you needed to move serious volumes of water. This isn't some historical curiosity either, because the fundamental design is still used in irrigation and drainage systems worldwide, especially in developing countries where you need something robust and maintainable that doesn't require complicated parts or specialized technicians. The mechanism is so elegantly simple that it basically hasn't changed in 1,000 years. Use a chain of paddles to push water through an enclosed channel, and you've got continuous water flow without complex machinery. Number 12 showcases something that completely changed how humans understand and navigate space: the UG2, or Map of the Tracks of U, which was carved in stone between 1136 and 1137, and is still preserved in Xi'an's Steely Forest today. This wasn't just a map, though. It was essentially the world's first geographic information system, presenting China with a mathematical coordinate grid, about 80 named rivers, and hundreds of place names, all accurately positioned relative to each other. Think about what this means for a second. While most of the world was still drawing maps that looked more like artistic interpretations than actual geography, the Song created a gridded reference system that let you measure real distances, index locations mathematically, and cross-reference spatial data across the entire empire. Every time you pull up Google Maps or use GPS, You're using the conceptual framework that the Song Dynasty pioneered, because they figured out that if you want to accurately represent space, you need a mathematical grid, not just pretty pictures. At number 11, we find something that revolutionized construction and still governs how we build today, the Yingzhou Faxi, or State Building Standards, compiled by Ligier and officially published by the Imperial Court in 1103. This wasn't just some guidelines or suggestions. It was the world's first comprehensive building code, and it reads like a fascinating combination of a modern codebook, specification manual, and cost estimator all rolled into one. The really brilliant part was the modular timber system called Kai Fen, which defined standard cross-sections graded in 8 sizes and subdivided into smaller units, basically creating the world's first modular construction system. Every building code in every city around the world, every construction standard that ensures your house doesn't fall down, every modular building system from IKEA furniture to prefab houses, they all trace their conceptual DNA back to this Song Dynasty innovation that said, hey, maybe we should standardize how we build things so they don't collapse and kill people. Number 10 brings us to porcelain, but not as the pretty art form you're thinking of. Instead, as a legitimate industrial technology that changed materials science forever. During the Song period, Chinese potters pushed ceramics to technical heights that Europe wouldn't match for another 500 years. Paper-thin Ding porcelains that seemed to glow from within, luminous Qingbai wares that became Jingde Zhen's calling card, and those gorgeous green Longquan celadons that became one of history's first global export products. But here's what actually matters for our story. Song kilns didn't just make beautiful things, they standardized the entire production process, from clay body recipes to glaze formulations to precise firing temperatures and atmospheres. The advanced ceramics in your phone, the insulators on power lines, the bioceramics in medical implants, even the heat tiles that protected the space shuttle, they all rely on the same materials. Science principles the Song kilns perfected, controlling composition, managing firing atmospheres, and developing reproducible processes that turn dirt into high-performance materials. At number 9, the Song Navy deployed something that sounds like it came straight out of steampunk fiction. Paddle wheel warships powered by human treadmills. In the 12th century, these ships used crews running on treadmills below deck to turn paddle wheels mounted on the hull, giving them speed and maneuverability that wind-powered ships couldn't match. Plus, they made excellent platforms for launching those newfangled gunpowder bombs we'll talk about later. These vessels played crucial roles in battles like Kaishi in 1161, proving that mechanical propulsion could free ships from the tyranny of wind patterns centuries before anyone dreamed of steam engines. The basic concept of using mechanical power to turn paddle wheels for propulsion wouldn't change when steam power arrived. It would just replace the poor guys on the treadmills with boilers and engines. Number 8 might surprise you because it's something we usually associate with the Industrial Revolution: coal as a widespread urban and industrial fuel. The Song didn't just use coal in blast furnaces for making iron, they systematically adopted it for heating homes, firing ceramics, and powering all sorts of urban industries in cities like Kaifeng. When timber became scarce, because they'd basically deforested huge areas for fuel, the Song made a conscious transition to coal that represents history's first large-scale fossil fuel adoption for civilian use. The modern energy system that powers our cities and industries has this deep Song-era precedent. And understanding how they made that first pivot from renewable biomass to fossil fuels helps explain both why industrial civilization developed the way it did and why we're now dealing with the climate consequences of decisions that trace back 1,000 years. Coming in at number 7, and closely related to coal adoption, is one of the most important innovations in metallurgy history: the shift from charcoal to coal, and especially coke in iron production. Facing massive deforestation and exploding demand for iron to make everything from farm tools to weapons, Song iron makers didn't just switch to coal. By the 11th century, they figured out how to coke bituminous coal, which means heating it without oxygen to drive off impurities and create a hotter burning, more efficient fuel. Modern metallurgical studies of Song-era blast furnaces show they were achieving temperatures and production volumes that Europe wouldn't match until the Industrial Revolution. This represents the earliest known fossil energy transition in heavy industry, and the energy logic they established, using fossil fuels to achieve temperatures impossible with biomass, still defines how we produce not just metals, but cement, chemicals, and basically every industrial material today. Number 6 introduces us to something that sounds like it belongs in a fantasy novel, but actually revolutionized mechanical engineering. Susong's astronomical clock tower, built in Kaifeng in the 1090S, which featured the world's first documented endless chain drive. Susong created this massive water-powered astronomical clock that was basically a skyscraper by medieval standards. And to transmit power up through the tower to all the moving astronomical displays and time indicators, he invented what he called a celestial ladder, which was actually an endless chain drive that could transmit rotary motion vertically and around corners. His illustrated treatise from 1094 preserves the design in incredible detail, showing exactly how the chain drive worked alongside the escapement mechanism that regulated the clock's timing. These two technologies, the escapement that creates regular ticks and the chain drive that transmits power, are fundamental to virtually every machine in the industrial age, from factory conveyor belts to bicycles, from motorcycles to the timing chains and car engines. At number 5 sits an innovation so important that global commerce would basically be impossible without it. The pound lock for canals, invented by an engineer administrator named Chao Weiyue in 984. Before Chao's innovation, moving boats over elevation changes meant either dragging them over dangerous slipways that killed a lot of people, or building massive systems of inclined planes that rarely worked properly. Chao replaced these death traps on the Grand Canal with double gate pound locks, essentially creating watertight chambers where you could raise or lower the water level to lift boats up or down like a liquid elevator. The famous Song polymath Shen Kuo later wrote about how these locks saved enormous amounts of labor and money compared to the old methods. From the Erie Canal that built America to the Panama Canal that connected two oceans, from the Thames locks that made London a global port to the Three Gorges Dam locks that are basically skyscrapers for ships, every lock system in the world uses Chao Weiyue's 1,000-year-old innovation of controlling water levels in a chamber between gates. Number 4 takes us into military technology with something that transformed warfare forever. The Song didn't just use gunpowder, they turned it into a systematic military technology. The Wujing Zongyao, compiled in 1044, doesn't just mention gunpowder in passing. It gives explicit chemical formulas with exact proportions of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, plus detailed instructions for building different types of explosive and incendiary devices. By the 12th century, they were fielding fire lances, which were basically the world's first guns, with the earliest clear combat use recorded at the Siege of Dayan in 1132, and they were launching bombs from trebuchets and deploying them in naval warfare. But here's what really matters. The Song shifted gunpowder from a mysterious alchemical mixture that a few people knew about to formulaic technology with standardized recipes, manufacturing processes, and tactical doctrine that told commanders exactly how to use these weapons in battle. The entire modern military arsenal of guns, bombs, and rockets descends from this crucial moment when the Song said, "Okay, let's stop treating this like magic and start treating it like engineering." Coming in at number 3 is the magnetic compass for navigation. But the Song contribution goes way beyond just figuring out that magnetized needles point north, or in Chinese compasses, south. Shen Kuo in 1088 gives us the first clear description of magnetized steel needles for navigation. But here's the kicker. He also noticed and recorded that magnetic needles don't point exactly to true south, making him the first person in history to document magnetic declination. Then in 1119, Zhu Yu's Pingzhou Katan records Chinese pilots using needle compasses for actual maritime navigation, which is our earliest hard evidence of compasses being used at sea rather than just for fortune-telling or feng shui. Even in our age of GPS satellites and electronic navigation, magnetic heading remains a baseline reference for everything from aircraft to submarines, and that Song-era discovery that magnetic north and true north aren't the same place is programmed into every navigation system on Earth. Number 2 brings us to an innovation that fundamentally rewired how human civilization works: government-issued paper money. Private merchants in Sichuan started issuing paper notes called jiaozi in the late 10th century as a convenience for traders who were tired of hauling around tons of metal coins. But when several of these private issuers failed and nearly crashed the economy, the Song government stepped in and took over the whole system in 1023, creating history's first state-backed paper currency. By the 12th century, paper money was circulating on such a massive scale that it had largely replaced metal coins for major transactions. What the Song figured out was that money doesn't have to be made of something valuable. It just has to represent value that everyone agrees on and trusts. Every paper bill in your wallet, every digital transaction in your bank account, every cryptocurrency trying to reinvent money, they're all just variations on the theme the song established. Value is about trust and systems, not about the physical material. And at number 1, the invention that made the spread of all other innovations possible and basically created the modern world, movable type printing, invented by Bai Sheng in the 1040s. We know about this incredible innovation because Shen Kuo, who seems to show up everywhere in song innovation, preserved the complete story in his Dreampool essays from 1088, giving Bai Sheng full credit and explaining the entire process in detail. Bai Sheng created individual characters from clay that he baked hard in a kiln, and these could be arranged on an iron plate with a special pine resin adhesive, inked and pressed to paper to print pages. After printing, you could heat the plate to melt the adhesive, remove the characters, clean them, and use them again for completely different text. This might seem like a small improvement over carving whole wooden blocks for each page, but it completely revolutionized the economics of knowledge. Once you have thousands of reusable characters, you can typeset and print new texts faster than ever before. And more importantly, you can make quick changes and corrections without starting over from scratch. Even though Chinese writing with its thousands of characters was way more challenging for movable type than alphabetic languages would be, Bai Sheng proved the concept worked and that modular, reusable components could mass-produce texts. Every book, newspaper, and website you've ever read exists because of this idea that information can be broken down into modular, reusable pieces and recombined in infinite ways. From Gutenberg's press, which was really just Bai Sheng's idea with metal instead of clay, to the HTML that renders this very sentence you're reading, it all goes back to that moment when a Song Dynasty craftsman figured out that making knowledge modular makes it scalable. Looking at these 15 inventions as a complete package, what becomes crystal clear is that the Song didn't just have a bunch of random good ideas that happened to work out. They developed a whole philosophy of systematic innovation that involves standardization, modularity, documentation, and most importantly, scaling from prototype to practical use. The modular thinking that runs through movable type, chain drives, and standardized construction systems basically invented the idea that complex things should be built from standardized interchangeable parts, which is the foundation of all modern manufacturing and even software engineering. Their financial innovations, like paper money, and their information technologies, like printing, created a world where abstract representations of value and knowledge could flow freely, setting up the blueprint for everything from stock markets to the internet. The infrastructure they built with locks, pumps, docks, and gridded maps created logistics systems that could move goods and people efficiently across vast distances, something we absolutely depend on in our globalized world. Their energy transition to coal and their material science breakthroughs in ceramics and metallurgy showed that systematic application of technology could overcome resource limitations. Though they also started us down the fossil fuel path, we're still trying to figure out how to get off. And their navigation and military technologies didn't just help people get around and fight wars. They established the principle that precise measurement and systematic doctrine beat intuition and tradition every time. The Song Dynasty ended more than 700 years ago, conquered by the Mongols, who ironically then spread many of these innovations across their massive empire. But the systematic approach to technology that the Song pioneered, where you don't just invent something but create standards, documentation, and institutions to scale it up, that became the operating system for technological civilization. We've added a lot of features since then, sure, but the core architecture of how we turn ideas into world-changing technologies was coded during those 3 centuries in medieval China. Every secure transaction, every manufactured product, every navigated route, every industrial process, and every piece of shared information in our modern world runs on principles and often actual technologies that the Song Dynasty developed when Europe was still figuring out windmills. They didn't just invent things. They invented inventing as a systematic practice. And that's why a dynasty that ended in 1279 still shapes virtually everything you'll do today.